Yes. Good afternoon to all participants and speakers who accepted our invitation to share the next 2 hours with us in our webinar, this time dedicated to the patient engagement in research. Isbe, Instituto de Saúde Baseada na Evidência, or Institute for Evidence-Based Healthcare, and Plataforma Saúde em Diálogo Platform Health in Dialogue welcome you all. We are very happy to have you here with us today and hope you will find this event useful for you. Thank you very much to all patients, families, researchers, pharmaceutical companies, representatives, healthcare professionals, and to all of you. A very special welcome to all patient organizations and to the European patient advocacy groups, EPAC, especially advocates from different European reference networks like Genturis, patients with one of the rare genetic tumor risk syndromes, Tamara Milagre, Bond, rare bone diseases, Inês Alves, connective tissue and musculoskeletal diseases, Ana Vieira and Vera Guimarães, and Vachirn, rare multisystemic vascular diseases, Manuela Lourenço Marques. For those who don't know yet, the European patient advocacy groups bring together rare disease patient advocates who are actively involved in the work of the European reference networks. In order to ensure a higher level of involvement of patients in the decision and opinion-making processes, Eurordis has established EPECs for each established European reference networks. EPECs bring together elected patient representatives and affiliated organizations who will ensure the patient voice is heard throughout the European reference network's activities. We are very proud to have you here. Thank you very much for coming, and we are looking forward to hear your participation during the discussion. The value of patient involvement in research has been increasingly recognized by all stakeholders. But are patients really engaged in research? How, when do they feel engaged? What does this value mean for each stakeholder? What has been made to make engagement stronger? Let us listen to our speakers, António Vaz Carneiro, Diane Gove, and Joaquim Brich, and find out their views, experience, and expectations on all these issues. And please don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat and during the discussion that will follow our speakers' presentations. And now, our first speaker, António Vaz Carneiro, will speak us about Isbe and its commitment to patient engagement. With 40 years of professional experience in Portugal and USA, António Vaz Carneiro is a medical doctor holding specialist degrees in internal medicine, nephrology, and clinical pharmacology. He is also a retired professor at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Lisbon, where he directs the Institute for Evidence-Based Healthcare. He's a clinical researcher with special interest in the areas of secondary research, systematic reviews and meta-analysis, methodologies of translation of knowledge into practice, over-utilization of health resources, applications of artificial intelligence in medicine, and research in precision medicine, big data. Professor Vaz Carneiro is the head of Cochrane Portugal and of the Choosing Wisely Portugal. This is a project at the Portuguese Medical Association where Professor coordinates the National Committee for Continuous Professional Development. Professor Vaz Carneiro, the floor is yours, and we are looking to hear from you. Thank you. Sorry, you are mute.
Thank you, Dr. Rosario. I would like to by starting to thank our other speakers here, and I'm very happy to be here as the head of the Institute for Evidence-Based Healthcare. This topic is very close to us. Now, I have a short 20 minutes presentation, and the idea beyond my presentation would be, first of all, to introduce the Institute for you, what do we do, what kind of structure we have, what kind of research we do, and then at the end, try to reflect a little bit with you on how the patients can be engaged in the 21st century. In other words, how can an institute like ours actually work actively with patients on several levels? And I'll try just to touch, of course, very superficially the topics. We will take a full day to really discuss on the different levels that patients actually can contribute to research. That's not our idea. Our idea is just basically to show you that we have an institute that in a certain way is special. As I will show you, these patients are really in the middle of the institute. Now, I'm going to share the screen, and this is it. Okay. Can you see it? Okay. Can you see it? Okay, great.
Okay.
So, now, so the institute was founded in 2019, so we are young institute, although we were working on some of the institutes that we had it 25 years ago. We are a private non-profit organization. We are a kind of an umbrella organization that bridge academia, individual researchers, and strategic partners. We do research in advanced education, so we are basically a research center. And finally, our headquarters are at the University of Lisbon School of Medicine, means inside the University Hospital and University campus, right here, okay? The mission and the vision are the ones pretty typical of an institute like ours. In other words, we want to advance knowledge, and that's really important. Based on the methodology of evidence-based healthcare and research to inform healthcare in a very productive and very impactful way. Our vision is to be recognized nationally and internationally. Okay, we have values and we have principles, and of course I'm not going to bother you with this, but as you can see, it's basically if I would resume, this would be: we want to do excellent, we want to do clinical research, excellent clinical research. We want to be innovative. We want to be on the side of the healthcare providers and want to feed them with high quality information for their work. And by doing so, we expect, and in order to actually to get that, we need independence. Independence, of course, we want to have a strong component, academic component on everything that we do. And of course, we want to have an international visibility as well. Now, what is the structure of the institute? And this starts now becoming a little interesting. So we have three types of associates. The first type of associate that we have is the medical school, University of Lisbon School of Medicine, and also the University of Lisbon School of Pharmacy. So this is the baseline institutional associates. Then we have two other kinds of associates. On the left-hand side, we have 6 researchers that loosely connect with some of the lines of research I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And we have 3 pharmacists and 3 doctors, national and international. And as you can see, looking on the right-hand side here, you can see partner associates, okay? And we have the National Coalition of Pharmacies. We have the Portuguese Pharmaceutical Industry Association. We have the Portuguese private hospitalization association, and most important here, we have the platform in dialogue. This is the patient component here. We have, I think, inside this platform something like 60. I think Dr. Rosario will confirm that 60 or 62 patient associations. And I'm not going to bother you with the structure of the institute. I think I explained enough. But the patients are at the level of the board. of the board of the institute. Okay, they have one representative there, and they also are part now of the executive committee. So we want the patients to be with us, we want them to work with us, we want them to give us feedback. Okay, so this is really a bit new for Portugal in the sense that we don't know that many institutes that actually have this intimate relationship with patient associations. Okay, now what are the research areas? Very quickly, as you could expect from a modern institute, we of course are interested in big data and real world evidence. We keep working on health outcomes research and health services research. Of course, we are now starting, we have several projects and starting several projects on artificial intelligence in health in all its ways of being implemented. Public health, public policies, health technology assessment. We have a very strong component for health technology assessment. And then we have this new field of resource overutilization, which is the choosing wisely that was already mentioned by Dr. Rousseau. Then we have digital health, and finally, knowledge translation. By knowledge translation, of course, we mean we publish newsletters, we do basic and advanced courses, and we are always involved in streaming down our knowledge to everybody that works with us and that comes and in contact with us. Very quickly, I'm not trying to speak on every of these things, not at all, but just so you can have an idea of what we do and the scope, basically the scope of the type of scientific fields that we work on. Okay, and also we have as we said before, we are kind of an umbrella organization in the sense that the model is not having a very strong staff, a very numerous staff. A lot of people on the staff know is to have a small staff, and then we work with outside groups doing the specific research that we want to publish. And so this is a very flexible, very flexible type of work. And we have, these are our 5 people from our core, so to speak, core. And then, as I told you, around this team, we work with a lot of other people and a lot of other experts. We have decided to do this because this way we could have rapid results. We could have a better way of having impact on the national, international level of production. So this is a small core that we expect that will grow, but we don't expect it will grow really exponentially. We want to have this type of relationships like I'm showing you here. Okay, for example, last year we had 28 research consultants from 19 national international organizations collaborating with us. This is a win-win situation. Win for us because we have the chance of meeting and supporting with these experts, but for them also because they get the resources to work with us. So it really works well. It's a model of work that is not new. I mean, a lot of institutes do this, of course, but we are very happy by choosing this basically because we work a lot with the national health system, and therefore this is really crucial. Of course, we work a lot with information and with patients, and of course this is some examples of the huge amount of databases, for example, that we normally use in terms of our studies. For example, for market authorization, or for example, regulatory affairs or private institutions devoted to research, whatever. We have all this kind of know-how. Okay. Now, some interesting key performance indicators on the first 2 years of our, actually, the second 2 years of our existence. We had 32 research projects conducted, supported by 15 sponsors that can be anywhere from pharmaceutical industry to European associations to private and public companies. We were, as I told you, assisted by more than 28 research consultants for our work from 25 national and international organizations. We organized 15 events with more than almost 900 participants. By events, we mean, for example, our annual meeting or webinars or courses, advanced courses, whatever. We publish 200, we are now on 222 newsletters together with Cochrane in Portugal. And these newsletters basically resume specific articles and specific studies that are relevant on the general practical clinical practice. Okay. We have almost 16,000 downloads from these newsletters. We have published in these 2 years 13 papers, which we are in good journals, which we are happy with this production. We have over 1,600 followers on Facebook and 1,300 followers on LinkedIn. This may be already a little outdated. Very quickly, just what kind of experience we have, real world evidence and work within the team and the people who work with us. We worked on all these areas of knowledge. Okay, just so you guys know, understand what kind of scope of what we do. I brought here, however, 4 specific areas in which I think we excel, in which I think we do a lot of work on this. First of all, the combination between person-centered value-based healthcare with value-based healthcare, and then trying to connect person-centered with value-based healthcare. We are with a private company. We have been developing. I'm not sure you know the ICHOM. ICHOM is one of the tools for implementing value-based healthcare. We have been following this movement from Michael Porter at Harvard from the beginning. Well, ICHOM about 12 years ago or 11 years ago. And so we are very deep committed with this movement. We actually have been part of 3 standard sets. As you know, they publish, depending on disease, they publish this kind of information, which is the outcomes that matters to patients. And then we were involved on arterial hypertension, we were involved on autism, and we are now finishing to the standard sets for childhood developmental disease. So we are really interested in working with patients at the structural level. From ICHOM, we want to capture what the patients need, capture what is their suffering, and in a systematic way, so we can adapt then this information, use it on everything that we do. Okay. You can hear here on up right hand side, this is a very interesting project we have with 14 other countries, and in which we try to do a bridge between patient-centered care and value-based healthcare. Okay, so it's just to show you how important we think that the patients are and the way that we actually approach them. But diabetes is also very important. We did a full program on diabetes, the policy brief and everything else. So we are also very interested in working on patients with diabetes in present. Now, as you can see, this is basically in your normal institute. Nothing extraordinary about it, except perhaps the center place that the patients occupy on it. And now I'm going to give you some ideas of how we see this collaboration, because that's a collaboration what you're talking about. What you're talking about is a collaboration. Let's just give an example of how important you guys are. 25 years ago, or 35 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was a young doctor, most of the things that we knew on medicine came out from studies of middle-aged men. Okay? Middle-aged men between 35 and 65. There are almost no women, except on women disease, of course. No kids, no elderly people, no different races, nothing. It was just basically the model was your average white male. Now we know that's a mistake, because people are quite different in the way that they live their diseases, the way that they respond to their treatments, etc., etc., etc. So we believe now that we should have a wide scope, a wide range scope of trying to get inside our clinical trials, our studies, the most varied, most complex possible types of people. And that's why I'm going to give you now, to finish very quickly, just a handful of ideas on how do we see here in Isbe, how do we see this reality. So why involving patients in medical research is a good thing? First of all, we need people for the patient community, because they can be extremely valuable members for research and scientific advisory bodies. Okay, so what we are talking about here is with or by patients or members of public, rather than to about or for them. What I'm trying to say here is I'm getting you in the middle of the decision process. Okay, all right. Then we need your prioritization. What is important for you? What is acceptable? What is relevant for you? It's very interesting because sometimes we feel that doctors, know pretty much what's important with patients. That's not true. There are plenty of studies that show that researchers and doctors think that they know what is important for patients, but then when we study them, we always come back with a difference in perspectives that sometimes even surprises the medical professions. Okay. Then, of course, we need collaboration to implement this type of research. Is very important, okay? And also in the end to avoid waste, okay? So we are using this. What we are doing is basically we'd like to focus on studies that are relevant to patients, okay? So how do we partner with patients? And again, I'm just telling you very superficial things. My colleagues, my next speakers will certainly talk in more depth about this. I'm just giving you a whole handful of ideas. You have you have the reference there, so you can check it out on the top of that, right here. So how do we partner? How are we going to go about it? First of all, patients can become members of research team. Okay, all right, basically. What does this mean? It means, as I will show you a little further, that they can ask the right questions. In other words, they can show us what's really relevant for them. I remember one day I presented some of my work in Brussels, and after I presented my work on ICHOM, one of the standard sets of ICHOM, this gentleman on a wheelchair came close to me and said, "Well, I like it very much. It was really very interesting. It's the first time that I see this focus on patients' interest and patients' disease and patients' way of feeling the disease." And he was the head of the European Associations of Rheumatoid Arthritis. Okay, and then he turned to me and said, "Do you know what is the most important thing for a patient in terms of quality of life for a patient with rheumatoid arthritis?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Pain in the morning." On the article, yeah, no, that's not. What about stiffness? Not stiffness. Oh, I was now getting a little lost. And I said, "Well, maybe that tiredness, this sense of being fatigued all the time." No, I give up. What was it? A good night's sleep. That was a lesson for me, let me tell you, because when I came back to Lisbon, I did a systematic review on trying to figure out what kind of clinical trials actually have as an outcome a good night's sleep, and there was exactly zero. So this kind of showed me that I thought I knew what is important for patients, but I was completely wrong. So I just give you this example because it allows us to think better how to do our work. Okay, so after we become the research team, they can also be part of the reference groups in key discussions, and also in a way of giving you a feedback of how they look at these things. All right. Then again, as I told you before, key research question. We need the people to show us what is the most important question. How do they collaborate with us in terms of study designs, outcome measures, selection, interpreting data, everything. Now you're going to ask me, I'm a patient and I don't know these things. Well, we train you. We will work with you. That's not a problem. We will work with you, and it's easier than you think at the end of the day. Okay. And that, of course, they have this amazing role of disseminating and implementing the results. Okay, and this is basically what I would say will be the partnership with patients. It's just some ideas. I looked for looking at. I tried to present to the institute. I tried to present our philosophy of working with patients, and certainly hope to be able to, in future, to be close to you, to work with you. Please get in touch with us. We'll be very happy to sit and think through these things. Once again, thank you, Dr. Rosario, for inviting me. Thank you all for your presence, and I'll give you the floor now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Vaz Carneiro, for your very enthusiastic presentation. And now it's time to hear our next speaker. Diane Gove will talk us about the involvement of people with dementia in research. Diane joined Alzheimer Europe in December 1996. After obtaining a honors degree in psychology, a master in education and psychoanalysis, and training as an analytical Gestalt therapist, she was awarded a PhD from the University of Bradford in 2013 for her research exploring GPs' perceptions of dementia and how these relate to stigma and timely diagnosis. Diane contributes towards several EU-funded projects in relation to ethics and public involvement, supports the members of the European Working Group of People with Dementia, and continues Alzheimer Europe's ethics work on disability and inclusion. Thank you very much, Diane, and we are looking forward to listen to your presentation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rosaria. I'm going to try to share my screen. I hope it works.
Okay. It works now, full screen.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so good afternoon or evening, everybody. Perfect. So, and thank you again, Rosaria, for having invited me to come here today, to be here by Zoom and to present the work of Alzheimer Europe on the public involvement activities with our European Working Group. So the issues I'm going to address today are, I'm going to talk about public involvement, what it is and why it's important, then look at which groups and people are involved in Alzheimer Europe's public involvement work, then briefly look at which issues have been addressed through this work, give you a few examples in different European dementia research projects, and then finish with a short summary and some conclusions. So to start with, what is public involvement work and why is it important? And first, I'm going to clarify what we mean by public involvement. And as I'm drawing here on the same framework that Antonio just mentioned, the Involve framework. So involvement consists of the active involvement of people in research projects and in research organizations other than as research participants, and it's a collaborative approach to shape, influence, or guide research projects as they develop. Then participation is about people taking part in a research study as a research participant. So they give informed consent, provide research data to researchers, which is then analysed in order to answer a specific research question. And then finally, engagement, which is about people receiving information, being informed about a research study, and it's about raising awareness, creating interest in the research, and sharing research knowledge and findings. So there are different arguments and rationale for public involvement in dementia research, and these we have divided them into two broad approaches. So the first emphasizes ethical, social, and political concerns. Public involvement is portrayed as an end in itself, linking involvement to democracy, so to democratic decision-making, public accountability, legitimization and transparency, to people having rights, so for example, a right to voice, a right to be involved in research relevant to one's own condition, and to the principles of justice and fairness. So knowing that people with dementia have been involved in a particular study may increase to some extent the trust and confidence that people have in the reported findings. So there's a huge responsibility to ensure that people with dementia are meaningfully and properly involved in research in this way. And then the other approach, that's where public involvement is perceived as a means to an end, linked to attempts to improve the quality, relevance, and/or utility of research, both from a researcher and a user perspective. So it can be considered as instrumental in providing knowledge that might otherwise be missing and that would benefit the research process. And then people with dementia can highlight issues and ask questions about things that researchers have perhaps not considered, draw attention to issues that would be problematic for people with dementia participating in research or wanting to, and sometimes challenging procedures which seem discriminatory and inappropriate, and pointing towards the need for certain changes in established practices. So both of these approaches reflect key goals of our organisation, Alzheimer Europe, and reflect what the different members of the European Working Group of People with Dementia have described as being important reasons for taking part in public involvement work. And I'll give you a bit more information about the European Working Group, which is the people that we work together with. So this diagram provides an overview of how public involvement can entail different levels of involvement along a continuum ranging from a one-off involvement in a particular task through involvement in several or at every stage of the research, up to full involvement as a member of the research team. Now, overall, the goal is for people with dementia to be involved throughout the whole research process from the earliest stage, and that can even include before the research starts during the project proposals, right through to the end of the project, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the same people have to be involved for the whole duration. So it shouldn't be assumed that everyone is capable of or interested in the same kind or level of involvement. And recently, and quite spontaneously, some members of the working group expressed an interest in greater involvement in a particular study, whereas others were happy to continue with more limited involvement. So this led us to create a core group in addition to the general group, which was ready to intervene more often and at shorter notice. And this enabled the researchers to move forward more rapidly with a particular issue. And also to bear in mind that some people work best in groups where they can bounce ideas off each other, elaborate points and agree or disagree on various issues. And we emphasize the importance of capturing the range of views and experience in the group, and that differences are good. We always try to emphasize that. So other people prefer to contribute their ideas and share their experience in writing, and this gives them more time to reflect and to provide more detailed responses, which they maybe couldn't do in the same on-the-spot group work. So with the help of the different members of the group, we work out together and with external researchers how to maximize each person's ability to contribute towards the PI work. So the issue of power is often raised in relation to public involvement, with frequent references to Einstein's concept of the ladder of involvement, whereby certain levels and types of involvement are considered worthless in a sense and others optimal, based on perceived levels of power in relation to decision making. So in the European Working Group, there's a clear desire to have a real impact on dementia research, to be involved throughout the whole process and to influence decision making, but whilst also empowering researchers to do good research by sharing with them their unique insight into dementia. And with these goals as the driving force and motivation for public involvement work, our particular group is not preoccupied with who has the last word. It's not about winning and losing. So public involvement's not a battle for power, but a matter of collaboration and valuing each person's contribution. Members of the European Working Group are keen to share their perspectives and experience for the benefit of the research, and they also recognise the various constraints linked to the research process, for example, linked to the ethics approval, progress and delays with recruitment, and the need for input from researchers working in completely different countries. So all of which determines to some degree when their involvement would be most beneficial. And then on the other hand, researchers recognise the effort that people with dementia make in travelling to meetings in different countries, for many working intensively, often in a foreign language for over 3 days. So whilst public involvement may be a means to an end in some respect, people with dementia themselves are not tools to be picked up and dropped along the way. Collaboration needs to be continuous, and it's important for inclusion that people with dementia feel part of the whole research process, and that there's mutual respect for each other's constraints and clarity about the roles and responsibilities of everybody involved. When planning and conducting public involvement work at Alzheimer Europe, our emphasis is on making it possible to include a wide range of people, for example, with different levels of education, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and with different levels of fluency in the working language, which is unfortunately for some people English. But we don't conclude that people with dementia must be trained in order to engage in public involvement. The reason for this is that training is often described in terms of ensuring that people with dementia can exchange with researchers on an equal playing field, but there's often an implicit assumption that people with dementia need to be brought up to the level of researchers. Granted, most researchers have spent many years studying, and most people with dementia don't have the same knowledge as they do. But it should also be recognised that many researchers have little understanding of what it's like to live with dementia and how to render their topic accessible to people with dementia. So in our experience, researchers can render the topic for which they need input accessible to people with dementia without requiring that the latter be trained. Actually, some people consider training as threatening authentic input from people with dementia, suggesting that they may over time become so highly informed that they identify with researchers and become distanced from what would normally have been their own point of view or the patient's perspective. But this is not our view at all. We work with people with dementia who have been university lecturers, healthcare professionals, and statisticians, and their experience of dementia is just as valuable and doesn't interfere with the actual public involvement process. So we feel that focusing on training can sometimes give the wrong message, perhaps indicating that it's only for highly educated people or for people who are good at studying, and this could discourage some people and be disempowering. So we therefore feel that training should not be a necessary criteria for PI work, but we do put a lot of time and energy into helping researchers to understand how to render the materials they use accessible to people with dementia. And this also helps researchers to gain insight in what it means to have dementia and still enables this exchange on an equal level. So people with dementia do learn about certain research practices and approaches along the way, and researchers do learn more about the challenges that people with dementia face, but it's more a matter of mutual learning and reasonable accommodation rather than of specifically training people with dementia. So now I'm going to, I've mentioned quite a few times the European Working Group, so now I'm going to actually tell you a little bit more about them and about the other people involved in our public involvement work. So early on, Alzheimer Europe relied on advice and involvement from two people, namely the late Peter Ashley and James McKillop. And we're very grateful for the work that they did. They spontaneously offered to be involved in our work. And in addition, they showed us that it was possible and essential to work together with people with dementia. And as such, they were the forerunners of the current working group. They worked alongside other experts on an equal basis in working groups, and they guided us on how to make the meetings and the work involved accessible to them. And before we set up the European Working Group of People with Dementia, we had a meeting with the Scottish Dementia Working Group in Glasgow. We listened to their experience and exchanged ideas. And then in 2012, we set up the European Working Group of People with Dementia with Helga Rohrer from Germany as the first chair. People with dementia are nominated by National Alzheimer's Association for a 2-year period, which is renewable. The current chair, the current chair is Chris Roberts from the UK, and he's unfortunately not on this photo at the bottom. He was probably in the board meeting at the time. The conditions for being in the group are to have dementia and to be able to follow discussions in English and to speak English, but if necessary with support. And there's no age limit, and people with any form of dementia can be members. The group meets regularly face-to-face and also, since the COVID-19 pandemic, online. And Zoom meetings tend to be relatively short because it's a matter of difficulties with concentration and following and how to actually intervene. It's not as easy as in a face-to-face meeting. Every person in the working group can be accompanied and supported by a person of their choice. And this person is usually a son, daughter, or partner, but sometimes it could be a close friend or a supporter from an Alzheimer's association. And their role is to provide any support the person might need, but not to intervene otherwise unless explicitly asked. And during the periods of the lockdown and due to distancing measures, members of the group have at times been supported from a distance, which was not ideal, but they've managed. And we actually didn't know whether it would work to do public involvement via Zoom until we actually had to, and then we did. But over time, the focus of dementia research has changed, and now there's a greater need to involve not only people with dementia, but also people with mild cognitive impairment, people who've been identified as being at higher risk of cognitive decline, people with so-called normal cognition, and people who are caring for or supporting a person with dementia. So we're now in the process of setting up a carers working group, and in January we'll start developing a pool of people from the other 3 groups, as well as additional people with dementia, whom we can then call on to contribute towards research through public involvement. And so now I'm going to turn to look very briefly at some of the issues that have been addressed through public involvement work. So the members of the European Working Group typically share their experience of living with dementia in relation to a particular research topic. So here you can see some of the issues that the European Working Group has addressed in public involvement work. The group's increasingly being involved in setting the research agenda, taking part in discussions about research priorities and gaps, and reflecting on ethical issues related to the topic of research. The groups provided valuable feedback to ensure that consent forms and participant information sheets are accessible to potential participants, that they respond to the information needs that participants may have, and that they're written using respectful language. Advising on issues related to recruitment and retention has also proven beneficial to researchers. And in addition to ensuring that supporting documents are accessible, the group has shared views on what they consider reasonable or unreasonable to expect from future participants, and looking at ways to make procedures and demands acceptable so that the participants don't drop off during the process, which is always a big problem. They've contributed towards the design and selection of devices or surveys to be used by research participants. And in several projects, the groups contributed to share their perspectives and experience with regard to stigma, motivation, vulnerability, preventive measures, and more recently, the use of artificial intelligence to predict progression to dementia, where they've highlighted and sometimes challenged taken for granted assumptions. So it's a little bit like what Antonio was saying before about thinking, well, researchers sometimes think we know what the issue is, and actually it turns out to be something different, or we have different assumptions. And quite a lot of clinical research currently focuses on data sharing and may call for some degree of disclosure of risk status. So that's been another topic of discussion. And another area that they contribute to is that of mentoring early stage researchers, or PhD students. Often PhD students involved in clinical research have had little, if any, interaction with people with dementia. So in Induct and currently in Distinct and Myriad, members of the working group have participated in meetings in which the students have presented their work and they've interacted with members of the European Working Group, who have then explained the importance to them of the research that they're carrying out, answered questions from the students, and given feedback on materials being developed. So some of the students have emphasized on how important that contact with real people with the condition has been for them. They've also commented on research project proposals and research protocols, and in one clinical trial, not actually for a drug, they raised the issue of age limits, and this revealed again some degree of assumptions about age based on stereotypes of older people, and in turn to an amendment in the protocol. Other issues were related to whether it was actually necessary to involve a study partner, as is increasingly the case now, and about barriers linked to educational level and place of residence. The quotation on this slide highlights the issue of people from minority ethnic groups not being sufficiently represented in clinical trials, and inclusion is something that is close to the hearts of many people doing public involvement work. So an important part of public involvement work is to challenge assumptions and priorities and to ask why something is so, not to accept unquestioningly standard explanations linked to time, effort, financial resources, but rather to ask for reasonable accommodations to be made and to do something that's more adapted to the needs and well-being of people with dementia, so as to ensure the inclusion of all people with dementia, such as those from minority ethnic groups, those who live alone, those with lower levels of education, or people living in rural areas. So now I've just got some time to tell you about some of the actual work that's been carried out in different research projects. So with Predict ND. So part of the Predict AD project involved the development of a citizen portal of tests and games designed to detect very subtle signs of cognitive deterioration. So members of the working group engaged in hands-on work in small groups to test and provide feedback on the content, style, accessibility, and interest in such a portal, but in the actual design phase. So we adopted an observational approach in which the members of the group commented out loud on what they were doing and thinking in small groups of about 3 people. And then this was followed by a discussion amongst the full group with the various tests and games projected onto a large screen to facilitate discussion and aid memory, together with a person who was knowledgeable about IT. And so then their experience and the issues raised were summarized in a report, communicated back to the IT designers, and then there was some further discussion and exchanges about the issues that were raised. So that was really helpful. With a roadmap project, real world outcomes across the AD spectrum for better care, the main issues addressed by the working group were the use of real world data, attitudes, expectations, and potential concerns about data sharing, and discussions about meaningful outcomes. And the main approaches that we used were we separated the group into carers and people with dementia. So in this instance, the carers weren't supporting the people with dementia, they were actually giving their own views. We had brainstorming and group discussions, priority setting through rating and ranking exercises, and also they contributed towards the development of a survey. The RADAR AD project, which was funded by Innovative Medicines Initiative, started in 2019 and it's still ongoing. And the ultimate goal of the project is the development and validation of technology-enabled quantitative and sensitive measures of functional decline in people with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. So the public involvement work consisted of organised, structured meetings planned several weeks in advance and at times with more rapid feedback when needed. In our experience, it's not possible just to ask people to turn up and discuss a topic. Obviously, there's a lot of work that goes into this beforehand. So we need to work together with the relevant researchers at least 1 month in advance to develop the best approach and develop preparatory meetings that are accessible not only to people with dementia, but also to people whose first language isn't English. And this slide shows the process for the public involvement work in this project that we're currently using in 3 other clinical research projects. So it involves the full group, as I mentioned earlier, for certain activities, and then a smaller core group, which also involves carers in their own right for some issues. So as you can see from the diagram, there's an ongoing process of identifying the key issues to be addressed, all working together to identify the best approach, then conducting the PI work, reporting back to the various work packages and the members of the advisory board. And this is an important sign of respect and reciprocity, but it's also to ensure that the PI work was meaningful and actually had some impact on the research process. So that doesn't mean to say that everything that's suggested has to be acted on, but it's important for the people involved in the work to know that their feedback was considered, and if not, why it was not considered feasible or desirable for a particular project or task. So sometimes there are unavoidable constraints, but the issues raised could have an impact on future research, so it wasn't worthless involvement. And here you can see some of the issues and approaches that we adopted in the RADAR AD project. So sharing perspectives on functioning, helping the device selection team, feedback about the RADAR AD focus groups, which were actually being conducted in some of the other participating countries. As I said, mentioned feedback on the protocol, feedback on the participant and study partner information sheets, ethical issues, the vulnerability and stigma related to the topic, and the issues related to recruitment and retention, which was one of the big areas for this project. I think I'll just skip the next slide because for issues of time. So then the EPAD project was slightly different in that the public involvement work involved a panel of people involved in the pre-dementia stage who were part of the EPAD readiness cohort. So there were 2 levels of public involvement, one involving small groups at local or national level, and then one at the European level, consisting of a representative from each of those national groups. And so they participated in the consortium meeting, and they had regular contact with a large number of the EPAD researchers. And they also discussed and provided their perspectives on specific issues, building on what had been discussed in the smaller national groups. And then I think this is the last example from a project called AI Mind. So the researchers here are working hard to ensure that the AI, artificial intelligence developed, is trustworthy, ethically, legally, and technically sound. But they were keen to ensure that people who would trust predictions that are made in this way about whether or not a particular person with MCI will progress to dementia. So there would be no point developing a fantastic solution if people wouldn't trust or want to use it. So we conducted public involvement work to better understand how people feel about the use of AI for predictions and how they can best communicate its use. We consulted people with mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and carers, and developed a set of guidelines based on their input in face-to-face meetings and also by Zoom. And separate from that, because that wouldn't then be public involvement, we consulted GPs and other healthcare professionals in the context of the broader stakeholder involvement. And we involved experts from the consortium in artificial intelligence to make this topic accessible to the different groups. And first of all, we had to have gain a full understanding of artificial intelligence ourselves. And the end result was a set of guidelines which will now be used and evaluated during the project, and then adapted if necessary once the tools that are being developed are currently implemented in clinical practice. So I'm going to now just give a brief summary and conclusions. So the members of the working group and other people with dementia, as well as with mild cognitive impairment and carers, can and do make an important contribution towards dementia research through public involvement, and have continued to do so throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We've learned a great deal through the work that we've conducted over the last 10 years, and I'd like to end with just a few points. First, that there's an increasing consensus that public involvement in research is crucial, that it should be carefully planned, organised and monitored, should be respectful and inclusive of everybody involved. And very important, it's needed to ensure that public involvement is meaningful and it's not just a box-ticking exercise for ethics approval or for funding. The relationship with researchers and their commitment to public involvement work are actually essential to the successful and meaningful public involvement work, but it needs to be properly funded and it needs to have proper reporting alongside other aspects of the research. There's no unique recipe, and late diagnosis of people or people with dementia not being told their diagnosis deprives them of the possibility to contribute towards dementia research, public involvement. There's a need for creativity, flexibility and commitment from the researchers, the ethics committees and the funders. Appropriate adaptation along the lines of reasonable accommodation as a means to enable more inclusive research. And for the researchers to engage in reflexivity and precisionality to see where they stand in relation to the topic and to the people that they are working with in public involvement. And then an appropriate investment of time, effort and funds. So thank you for your attention. Those are just a few resources that we've developed in connection with this.
Diane, thank you very much for sharing with us your experience with European Working Group of People with Dementia, and for showing us that it is possible to involve and even engage people with dementia and in research, and how it is possible with so many good examples. Thank you very much. And now it's time to move to our last speaker. Last speaker is Joaquim Bridge, and he will talk us about his experience of a patient advocate. He is the president of the Portuguese Neuromuscular Association, representing this association in different international organizations, namely being member of the European Reference Network for Neuromuscular Diseases, being the vice chair of the Muscle Diseases Group. Joaquim has a long experience as a carer of his son with a rare disease. Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Joaquim is member of the Patient Advisory Board of the European Patient Advocacy Group, EPAG, of Eurordis. He is member of the Commission for Inclusion Policies for People with Disabilities in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, and he is member of the National Health Council representing Portuguese Neuromuscular Association. Joaquim, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosario. Good evening, everyone. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay.
Perfect, okay.
It's okay. Well, I want to start by apologizing for my bad English. Maybe some wrong words occurs, but I have been asked to talk a little bit about the involvement of patients or their representatives in the various stages of research. In my opinion, in Europe, the advocacy movement has been built on the struggle of many organizations, many families, and of course, many patients. The rare disease sector, which I know a little better, is the one that has demanded the most from researchers because of the complexity of the solutions. Long waiting periods for lackluster results have created the need for organizations that are more focused on disease groups, with experts more focused on solutions that involve the resources need to achieve the goal, research for the patients. We need, of course, we need the investigate always in favor of the patients. And in this moment, the innovation means introducing improvement in any system. But in the modern world, when such as the one we like to claim we live in, the recent decades has seen changes in almost all technological concepts of manufacturing, productivity, management, and economy, education, among many others, all of which are very present in your daily lives. We like a serious approach to the question that for some time now has been posed to all of us. Why don't we invest more in research and in science? Maybe it's a very good question. It was on this idea that in the European Union, the 24 European reference network are born in 2017. The European reference networks are centers of expertise that connect experts and researchers who share the same interest in the specific rare disease or highly specialized treatment across the European Union and countries of the European Economic Area region. Of course, in this moment, maybe we need to enlarge to area of the some others region of the globe. But ERNs are the first and foremost healthcare networks that aim to improve access to diagnostics, care and treatment by sharing the expertise, knowledge and resources, guiding care and treatments. ERNs give clinicians and patient organizations from different countries the opportunity to co-design and co-create better healthcare services for people living with rare diseases. The 24 network in operations, let me not read the definitions of each one, but the 24 are here with their own definition and nomenclature. The principles are to share knowledge and experience from one to another. Of course, in this moment, we need to share all the knowledge and all the investigation are made in all parts of the world. Measuring challenges well and comparing them to benefits involving the main recipients, patients, or their advocates. But what about the most recent and very important challenge? In this moment, we are in the full process of evaluation of all the networks and certification by the quality reasons. And the focus of patient representatives involvements in the evaluation, with specifically to give the patient's perspective on 4 points and 4 main elements. The questions are, is the structure of patient involvement in the network enable meaningful contribution? What has been the impact of patient involvement in the strategic discussion and the operation activity of the networks? What has enabled meaningful involvement of patient representatives, and what were the barriers? Your reflection regarding the whole ERN system, in particular the extent the network has accomplished the objectives, and what have been the achievements of the network. Like I said, we have a complex process of the certifications by all the 24 networks reference, and the consortium, the international consortium responsible for this evaluation and these certifications are, I think, very hard work to make this certification and this evaluation. And what, who are patient advocates anyway? Well, we have, maybe I share with you two definitions. Of course, we don't have an exact translation to Portuguese language, but in the medical dictionary, the patient advocate is an individual, a friend, a nurse, or ombudsman, physician or social worker, or any other professional who pleads for and preserves the patient's rights to the health care. The patient advocates address many common and important health care issues, including the right to access a healthcare provider, the right to obtain confidential care, and the right for the patient to work after diagnosis or after the treatment. But in the real life, the patient advocate are the patients themselves, their legal representatives, their parents when is minors, or their caregivers. Of course, so the person who feels accompanied and suffers directly from the illness. Someone of the patient advocates here in this photo, someone of them Portuguese people, under all these priorities, over 300 patients advocates from 28 countries of the European countries are already recognized and trained to serve in the 24 European reference networks. They are organized in European patients advocacy groups and work on behalf of patients in each of their country. The importance of their voice, of course, from the moment the key stakeholders got involved, the term patients becoming part of a referential vocabulary. Terms like patient representatives, patient advisory board, patients, European patient advocacy group, or healthcare providers, etc., has been a new word on the context of the rare diseases. And in Portugal, well, in Portugal we have only 12 patient advocates recognized by the ERNs. Although not all are active. We have 2 in the ERN Reconnect. We have 2 in Genturis, 3 on the metabolic ERN. We have 1 in Transplant Child, 2 in Wassern, 1 in the Euro NMD, myself, and 1 in the Eurobond. Maybe we have some causes for low participation in our country or and in other countries, because we have in Europe some countries with the low participation too. But some causes in our countries, maybe the few reference centers recognized by ERNs. We don't have all the ERNs in Portuguese. We don't have Portuguese clinicians in all the ERNs, and we have a little research in rare diseases. And we have too few clinical trials in Portugal, but maybe for the political reasons, we don't know. And I think the political reasons are not the reason, the good reason for this. And we have maybe some possible solutions. We need to make the greater involvement of patient organizations and increase the empowerment of their leaders. I think it's the problem, the new problem and the modern problem of the patient organizations. We have to the better relationship between the scientific community and the patients community. That is a problem. It's not new problem, because some patient associations talk about this problem with very many times. We need co-creating solutions. Of course, we need art together for these solutions, and we need to expand the study of needs between clinicians and patients. Well, in conclusion, the principle, if I have presented, it is based on the concept of organizing rare diseases network, but with the methodological reorganization that was experienced during the pandemic, many of these principles should be extended where they are not implemented to common diseases. And why not? The patient involvement in our research process should start immediately after their decision to investigate any diseases. There can be no research without patients, and there will be no solution if they have not been tested by them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joaquim, for your very good, excellent presentation. Thank you for efforts to speak in English. I think it's difficult. I have the same difficulties as you, but you explained everything very, very well. And now we have a few minutes, and I guess that Professor Vaz Carneiro would like to make some questions to our speakers before opening the discussion to everyone. Yes?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rosario. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Joaquim. It was really a pleasure to hear your point of view. Again, we believe we are all in the same tune, I think. We are talking to the converted. You see my point? I mean, we should start talking to the non-believers, okay? Because anytime I bring these notions to my colleagues around in Portugal, and not only in Portugal, I always get people, excuse me? Okay, so we are talking to convert, but that's important to talk about these issues. Because once again, there is this trend, this major trend in the most advanced health systems trying to put the patient in the center of the system. Now, there are several ways that we can do this. And certainly some of the most, daring systems, for example, have patients in the committees that design hospitals, for example. So they have to say, would you like to have a corridor here, or would you like to have a garden there? You can look at this way, or you can just say, I need feedback for this specific disease because what you are studying is not what is meaningful to me. I need some other data. And people that are always taking care of patients like me and doing clinical research, that's a central point. Can we use the information gathered by these advanced studies on my everyday patient, on my regular patient, yes or no? And that's really the center of the entire business of doing research, okay? So thank you very much for your long views. I would like, just drop one or two questions here. Of course, they have talked us about Alzheimer's disease. That's a specific case. As the patients get more and more sick, they get less and less possible. It's more and more impossible for us to actually deal directly with them. So I would like to ask you this: how do you, articulate at what point do you feel that you should articulate the connection between the patient and the carer and the person that takes care of it in terms of giving me, for example, the feedback? What is the point at which you feel you need almost translate what the patient is doing? Isn't this extremely difficult?
You're asking me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, the public involvement work that we're doing, I should say that's in the context of research. It's not in the context of clinical practice, but obviously the two are closely related. But one of the things that we feel is important is that we have to take, well, you could say reasonable accommodation to try to maximize the potential of people to take part, to contribute towards the discussions themselves. And one of the things that we do is that's why we have a condition really for being a member of the working group, and that is that each person has somebody who supports them. And that's also because we have meetings, face-to-face meetings in different countries, and so we have a responsibility towards people. We can't just let people travel on their own and not be there to support them. So that's one of the conditions. But also they play a valuable role in the meetings and the consultations to actually help the person to express themselves to the greatest extent possible. But also for some of the people who are whose dementia is more advanced, there's a lot more preparation goes into the preparation for the meeting between that person and their carer or supporter at home, so that by the time they get to the actual meeting, the discussions, they've already discussed all the ins and outs of the topic, and so then it's okay, or it's acceptable for the carer or supporter to take a more active role in actually communicating their wishes. But what we don't want to do is to say like, oh, at a certain stage, this person is no longer able to contribute. We have to make sure that the contribution is meaningful. And it does actually happen that sometimes we have, for example, 2-year terms of office, and that's renewable. So somebody might have been in the group for say 4 or 6 years, and over that period of time, depending on the individual in question, their dementia could have progressed considerably.
Sure.
And sometimes there comes a stage when it becomes clear to everybody, including the person with dementia, that they're not as able to contribute towards the discussions. We don't want to then engage them just out of like tokenism to say, oh, we have different people involved in the discussions at different levels. So we really try to make every possible give every possible kind of support, but individualized to that particular person, to enable them to participate as long as possible. But when it no longer becomes feasible for that person and for the dynamics of the group, then we discuss that all together. And we've never had a difficult situation. We've always come to the solution with the people involved. So I think that's one of the important things.
Thank you very much. Now I was going to talk with Joaquim. Allow me to tell you this way. Please call me Antonio. Rare diseases is a special field. It has always been a special field. But if you look back 25 years, 20 to 25 years, it has grown in importance, it has grown in impact, and it has grown on resources allocated to study the diseases. There are perhaps, I don't know, 7, 8, 9,000 rare diseases by definition, okay? And of course, they are completely different. They can be totally different. They can be genetic on the little baby, or they can have some complex neurological, disease late in life. And one of the things that we need when we work with patients is to have patients work with us that are knowledgeable in their disease. By knowledgeable, I mean that understand the way that we design and implement clinical studies. And this is, how do you, within the rare disease community, train people to actually advise the researchers and evaluate what the researchers are doing, bringing their own input to the process? I know it's not an easy question, but I really would like to know what you feel about this, what you think about this.
Well, I think the problem in the rare diseases is the low investigation in treatments, because we don't have
Enough patients.
Yes, we don't have many patients, and we don't have many treatments. And the treatments we have are very, very expensive, and it's another problem for the investigation and the research. Of course, it's a problem for involvement the patients in the research, because the ends of the solution are not sure. We have a long periods
Sure.
with the clinical trial, or with the investigation in some molecules, the rare molecules, and unknown molecules is the very, very big problem. But I think the most important question is the lower prevalence of this importance in the families, or the investigations, or the clinicians community, because we have a problem with the clinicians. We don't have lots of clinicians interested by the investigation in rare diseases. Maybe it's a problem. I don't know if some and other colleagues have another new opinion, but I think it's the recent problem now in this moment. Maybe when we can make some treatments with good results, we're trying to enthusiasm the
research community,
the scientific community,
of course,
because we need this the involvement and this enthusiasm too.
Thank you. Now, thank you very much. I'm going now to reach for the patient advocates, and I know, because we are having some messages here, that some people are here, so I'm going to ask Tamara Milagre. Hello, Tamara. Please give us a statement. Please put a question to our speakers, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for giving me the word right now, and I really appreciate the great talks we just heard from the speakers. And I would like to bring in my personal experience in involvement of research. It can be as simple as asking a question to the investigators. So we have a very good project right now going on with Maria do Carmo Fonseca. You know her very well. She is a renowned researcher worldwide, And one day she said, Tamara, if you need something, so I need to explain, I represent genetic mutation carriers with a high risk for hereditary cancer. And our research is mainly focused on the disease. And I would like to see research focused on health. So how can we prevent better hereditary cancer and genetic mutation carriers? Because the other thing is we advance with radical surgeries, and in some cases there is no need because the person would never develop breast or ovarian cancer, for example. The risks are not 100%. So that's really, it's a shame that we need to have these radical steps to prevent for sure the cancer, mainly ovarian cancer, as you know, does not have an early detection. Nowadays, still no early detection possible, and it's very deadly cancer, therefore. And so we need to take those out, but there is still a 50% chance not to get it. So we need to throw us into menopause, surgical menopause, 15 years and before the supposed age. And that is really a huge decrease in quality of life for a woman. And so I asked her, please explain why two sisters growing up in the same household, eating the same stuff, breathing the same air, having the same mutation, one of them is getting sick with breast cancer at 27 and dies at 29, and the other one dies at 96 in her sleep. Why is that happening? What is the protective factor of the other sibling? And so there was born a very, very interesting research project regarding breast organoids. So she took skin samples from myself and other genetic mutation carriers and turned them into stem cells. And now my breast tissue is growing in Instituto de Medicina Molecular, as you know very well where it is. So this is a very important approach because we will learn better when cancer grows, in which circumstance, and why does it not happen in other people that are healthy.
Okay.
And so it can be as simple as that, as well as, so it starts with the idea, and then the design of the clinical trial protocol is also very important to have the input of the patient representatives, because if you want to look for real needs of a certain community, you need to involve them actively. I mean, we heard that very clear in the talks, and also the review of the informed consent is very important, and the question of the dissemination is crucial, because investigation is only worth it when you spread the word, when you get your results out. Sure. And so we can help in multiple ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamara, for sharing your experience with us. I'm following my list, okay? So please forgive me. I'm going to ask Ines Alves to give us her feedback on this. Please make it short so we still have a lot of people to ask. But thank you again for your presence here. Ines Alves? Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so let's go forward for Ana Vieira. Can we have some?
Hello everyone.
I can see you. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me in good conditions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers for incredible presentations. You've covered a lot of topics. Well, I would like to make maybe a provocative statement.
Please do. Please do.
So I deeply believe that patients are experts by right, as they possess the knowledge of the lived experience of the disease. But there's a problem we should address as well, and has not been mentioned here. And if it has, please forgive me because I missed it. We've talked about training patients to cooperate in research. But maybe we need also to train researchers to deal with patients or to involve patients in research, because I think most of the problems are based on the way we are perceived by clinical researchers. They have this difficulty in seeing us as partners, and they often, many of them, cannot see us as something different from the patient that arrives every day into their medical appointment office in their clinical practice. They see us most of the times as the subject of research, and it's difficult for them to see us as a partner. So we must also help researchers, providing them some kind of basic training to involve patients and to work with patients, because same way patients can learn along the way, just like Diane mentioned, so researchers can learn along the way, but maybe they need their basics first. Another problem also is the moment of involvement. Co-creation, co-design is a very glossy statement, but in reality, in real world, in the world out there, they reach out to us when everything has been decided. The project design, all the working packages, and so on. So most of the times, and I'm speaking about my personal experience as well, just like Tamara, most of the times when I'm asked to join the team, everything has been decided. So I don't see in many times what influence, what decision-making I can influence, how to make that research, this and that, all the research really impactful in patients' lives. And I will stop here to give voice to another speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's a really important issue in the sense that the building up of a research project has several phases in it, and there are several components, so to speak. And one of them is the methodology that the researchers actually want to implement to do the study. And of course, when we are discussing that, we waste a lot of time on the small, very technical and very complex details on how the methodology is going to work. What kind of steps we want to actually make. So it's fairly understandable that when a patient comes along, that people can look and say, this person does not know these details, and therefore I'm not going to even involve them. So that's a work we have to do. At NICE in the UK, for example, they train the patient. They actually train the patient. And in the Institute, we've been doing a lot of knowledge translation to patients for the last 20 years. And one of the things that I learned is if we can explain carefully something, people will understand. We may even think it's complex, but if you know how to explain it, people will understand. So thank you very much for your feedback on this, because I think this is really, really important. Again, goes together what we already talked about. At which point should the patients actually get into the research team? All right, now pass the word to Vera Guimarães, please. I'm not sure she is here, but I hope she is.
Olá, sim, estou.
Good.
Não assisti desde o início, estou aqui com um bocadinho de dificuldades técnicas.
But we are listening well to you.
Okay, want me to speak in English, right? I was listening to Ana Vieira. She's speaking about the importance of patients have formation, and the other way around, the researchers understand the role of patients. That's exactly it. It's kind of what I think also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Last but not least, Dr. Manuela Lourenço Marques.
Hello. First of all, I have to thank you to all my colleagues, all my Apex colleagues, because we work together in Europe, and sometimes no one knows us in Portugal. So it's important that we are here together to make our voice louder. So I represent a disease that is not yet in the research, not as much as I would like, but I try to put my disease, and because I don't know if Joaquin explained, but it's very important to know that when we are working in Europe, in a rare disease, we are working because or we have a disease or we are a family of someone who has it. So we are quite like friends of that disease. So as Joaquin and Tamara and the others say, they are already in the researches and things like that. But I, in my disease, I'm a little bit behind that because no one starts thinking about a disease. And so it's so important our work as it is so as much as important as the others, because we have to work with the clinicians, we have to make our visibility, and we have to transform the clinician words in patient words, which is really, really important for some of the people that don't know any points of our disease. So this is one of our works, and we are working quite hard in Europe, and we are trying to just make our work also very, very well known in Portugal as well. So thank you for this opportunity, and that this is maybe the only beginning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I called everybody except one person to the patient advocates. I think
Inés is here. I think Inés is here, but
Inés, I'm sorry.
Inés is here. She opened the camera, but
okay,
Inés.
while she's getting ready, maybe we should just,
Yeah.
invite all the people that are listening to this webinar. Please, the floor is yours. Just raise your hand, and Filippo will allow you to ask the question. We have several questions on chat. Let me just start by the chat. Hola, just salutation. Hola.
We are quite
Joaquin, you were very good. Everybody liked you very much. Blah blah blah. That's it. I don't have anything.
Now we have a question. We have a question from the participants. I will read it. When do we consider the patients as full members of the research team and empower them to understand all the mechanisms involved and train them to be the voice that will disseminate the results? This is a question.
From ask that question, Diana?
She or he doesn't explain. So, who wants to add something to this issue?
This is one of the questions that we have on our YouTube chat from the participants that we are having on the online stream.
So who wants to answer?
Or to add something, or to make another comment?
I'm not quite sure because the way the question's phrased, but I'm just thinking that when we would consider somebody as a full member of the research team, I mean, it's kind of an equal partnership, even though people have got different roles. And so just the term full member is what's putting me off a bit to say whether somebody is or isn't. But like we've had in the past, for example, we've been conducting some work on sex, gender and sexuality in the context of dementia. And there, the framework that we had was to have an expert panel of people with different areas of expertise, with different gender identities and sexual orientations, with and without dementia. So in that context, we had people with dementia involved in that working group. And I suppose then the idea of full member might be more obvious because everybody's working together on the same tasks. We're all drafting, we're all commenting and sharing our experiences. And then we have in other situations, for example, somebody might be, as I was saying earlier, along the continuum of involvement, being involved in a particular task, but that's the involvement that they want, and they don't want more involvement than that. And then we have also like the instance, which was a project called Radar AD, where we had, for example, a core group and then the more general group. So it's a little bit difficult to answer because of the different levels of involvement corresponding to people's wishes for involvement and what they actually want to do and how they can contribute. I don't suppose that's probably what you meant, but it's just a question.
Tamara raised her hand.
Yeah, sorry, just to tell the person that asked the question, I suggest it's a Portuguese person. So we have several training programs in Portugal that are quite well organized. So of course, we have the U-Party website with the toolkit. We have also from the School for Public Health regular training programs that are really good and well organized and quite complex. So there is a possibility to get trained. Just reach out to the Patients Academy of the public school, no, of the School for Public Health, Escola Nacional de Saúde Pública, portanto. Thanks.
That allows me to ask a question for our two speakers, which is the following. If we are proposing that we have patients representative or patients themselves at the teams that do the clinical research, then we are talking about a professionalization of these people. What kind of resources should the system have in terms of helping and giving the information to these people needed for them to do good advices and good choices? I'll start by you, Joaquin. Should we have an independent financing for these people? Same way that we have financing to do the study, to pay people, whatever tests we may do, should we have on every single grant proposal a small amount or a bigger amount to get the patients inside the study and therefore train them and whatever it's needed?
Maybe can I answer with the answer how I have at the last I think 3 years ago I asked a professor, an English professor, a specialist in neuromuscular diseases, about her opinion on the research in microdystrophin, is the new clinical trial in neuromuscular diseases for the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I asked him, what do you think the results of this clinical trial? And he answered me, well, my answer depends every time of your expectation. And in the rare diseases, it's every time like that. Depends every time for our expectations. And because we have a rare diseases and we have a very high expectation about the group of the EPECs, or the patient advocates, or the European reference centers, or another organizations in the rare diseases. But I think it's very, very, very difficult to have better expectations about the results when we don't have the good relationships with the researchers or the clinicians, or we need to involve much more the clinician, with the investigator, with the hospital, with the clinical trial, with the reference center. We need growth very, very, very much more of this.
I was thinking when we were talking about that, I was thinking that we didn't discuss something that is really very important in terms of patient participation, which are the patient registries. Yeah. Now, patient registries are a very fancy, complex, and but very extremely good source of information. And if they are important on, very prevalent diseases, they are much more important on rare diseases for all kinds of reasons. Yeah. So we have all this information within each patient, and of course, if you have a registry, you can do the clinical trials, you can look at the big data and real-world evidence on interventions, you can try to identify subgroups of patients that may respond differently. We may follow them prospectively into the future, trying to figure out what's going to happen, what's happening in terms of complications, hospital admissions, tests requested, these kind of things. And so I also think that from that standpoint of view, the rare disease is a particularly good field to use these tools, because we really need to have a certain number of patients before we do a clinical trial. And I remember one issue several years ago at the New England Journal of Medicine, in which back to back there were 2 clinical trials. One clinical trial with clinical hypertension that were 22,000 people, and right after that one, a clinical trial on a mucopolysaccharidose type of disease, and were 8 people. So I look at that and I say, the first one took 3 years to finish. The second one, the 8, took 10 years to finish, to be able to identify people with this disease. So I think really strongly that the field of rare diseases should actually be a kind of a beacon for all the rest of the areas, because the utility of this kind of information is really, really, really there. What do you think about this?
Well, I have a personal opinion about the registries, because all the registries, all we need are in the hospitals. All the rare diseases, the Portuguese or international rare diseases, and the rare patients have a lot of notes in the consultation of the specialists in the public hospitals.
Yeah.
Well, the registries are there. Why we don't? Why we cannot share the registries? I don't know if the patient are African, European, Caucasian. I don't know that. I need to know what kind of disease he have, what kind of deletion he have in case of the genetic disorders. But we need to know, and we need to share the information, because we have the information. I don't need to put another registries, the new registries in the everywhere, Treat NMD, because in the neuromuscular diseases we have a new base of the registries in the Treat NMD, but we don't have the data, because the hospital don't care about the registries, and the doctors too. We need to make some issues to make an obligation of the doctors. You know, rare patients, okay. What you know about the rare diseases we have, and I think it's easy, but well, depends of the doctor, depends of the administration of the hospital, depends of the political. Often we have many reasons.
If this gives you any comfort, we don't have that information for very prevalent diseases as well. So they are somewhere here in the hospital. There are billions of data points here in the hospital. And anytime you want to try to check it out, it's always a nightmare. So I totally agree with you. We need to build up data sets.
We need to share the information.
Yeah, share it and make sure that the information is good, because that will make life very easy to everybody. And I thank you for that, because that's exactly one of the most important points here.
The important information.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anna raised her hand. Perhaps she has a question.
Yes, I don't see it from here where I am.
It's not really a question, but I would like to add a comment on registries, which is a very important question. And I thank you, Antonio, for bringing this up, and Joaquim for your comments. This should be a deliverable of the European reference networks. So the idea in the European Commission is giving out funding to each ERN for building up European registries on the diseases each ERN covers. And the difficulty is to merge all the different national registries across Europe for all the different diseases each European reference network covers. But this is planned, and there's money for this, and at least at Reconnect we are working on this. But we cover only 10 diseases, so it might be easier for us than for the other ERMs. Thank you.
Diane, you have a question. Sorry.
No.
Yes.
No, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to come back to some of the points that were raised earlier. And coming back to the point about the professionalism of patients and PI being properly financed so as to get people inside the study and trained, and that just made me think about the issue that Tamara raised about sometimes how it's so important just for somebody to actually ask the simplest of questions, and that can be like a catalyst that results in huge changes in the area of research. And I think that's hugely important. And also the points from Anna Vieira and Vera about training the researchers. And that's one of the things we've found a lot in the PI work that we've been doing in various European research projects, that at the start of the project, there are researchers who are fully in favour of and supporting public involvement work, others who really can't see the point at all, but they're kind of semi-obliged to do PI work. And then there are those that don't actually understand the concept. And I think with regard to training, I think it would be good for some kind of training in the actual research projects. But one of the things that we found very beneficial in what I was mentioning earlier, which is about the young PhD students, so the early career researchers, is I think there's a lot of learning by experience, that people are actually getting into that situation and actually then realizing, oh, this is useful and it can be beneficial to the research process. And that the more that public involvement is a necessity for funding and for ethics approval, although that does lead to a lot of people trying to just tick the box without actually wanting to do proper PI work, it is also a useful starting point, because then researchers are obliged to take this on board and to actually see how they can involve patients and people with different conditions. And I think that with regard, actually, we also experienced this problem about researchers, I keep saying people and researchers contacting our organisation on the last minute of a project proposal and saying, oh, we really, really want to involve some PI work because it's so important, but they hadn't thought about it until right at the end, and then they want to add it on. And I think it's important to educate researchers at the same time to say, well, that's not going to work. We're not just going to join on the last minute just so that the research ethics and the funding can go through. So I think there's a gradual process of not training, but learning and gaining an experience. But I think those are very valid points that were raised.
One of the things that I feel that are probably most important for a patient's association to do, I'm sorry, this is my anti-anxiety vault. I don't have any anxiety, but I just have it in my hand. One of the most important issues and actually jobs that a patient association should have is to look for financing for scientific studies. If the financing comes from patient associations, I can assure you that your role from the start in the studies will be quite different than if the study was financed by some other institution or academia or whatever, or pharmaceutical industry, and then they come to you. Because one of the things interesting about the registries is who owns the registry. If the registry is owned by a patient's association, I think your position is way better than if the registry is somewhere in an academic unit or somewhere in a hospital. So I would say that probably one of the ways that I would like your opinion, of course, one of the ways that you could implement and actually make it easier for patients to be present in this process will be to be the patient association that actually finance, if at all possible, and of course there are plenty of examples of this happen, financing the studies. What do you think?
I think that changes a little bit the role. It depends on the organisation. It changes the whole role of the organisation. And I don't think that we have any problem actually involving people with dementia in research and for this to be accepted in a positive way, provided that that the researchers in question are actually favourable to the approach. But I think that one of the things that is important for us that we've found is, which kind of to a certain extent dictates the success, I wouldn't say fairly, but less success of involvement, is whether the people who are heading the projects, like the public, the PIs, but in the other context, that if they are in favour and promoting the work, the involvement of people with dementia, then that is what is a key issue. But I was just wondering if maybe Rosario, you had an opinion on that as the chair.
No, I don't have any to share now at the moment. Okay.
Any more questions? Any more comments?
I think it's Tamara. She's
Tamara.
trying to speak.
Yes.
Again, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to tell you again the own experience. As we got tired of not having data. We do not have hereditary cancer data. We have no idea how many people are affected. We started a bottom-up project, a patient registry that is centered in the patient and in the user. So the user is absolutely in charge, and the user has also the whole clinical data in his devices because he can upload the reports from the several hospitals. You know, we have not interoperable systems. So if you want to get your process together, you need to collect it. And we create this device so people have the whole clinical process always with them, even when they go to emergency room, when they are on holiday leave on Algarve. So they will be informed regarding clinical trials on European level. They will raise their literacy in health in a personalized way because we work with artificial intelligence and so on and so on. So therefore, we created a consortium for private financing, mainly with Industria, but also diagnostic labs and health insurances and so on, because projects that are initiated by patient organizations do not really have another way of financement. So for the sake of transparency, we just invited many companies to take part in this consortium. So this is going on. And the other thing is that we have another audition tomorrow in the Health Commission, and we want a national day for hereditary cancer. It's absurd. We have national days for trees, but we do not have national days for hereditary cancer. So we will get that one. And we want a national clinical registry for hereditary cancer, because our national cancer registry does not discriminate sporadic from hereditary cancer. So again, no data, not existing, but with those two pillars and another study we also integrate, which is the socio-economical burden of the disease of hereditary breast and ovarian cancer. Those are the pillars to convince decision makers to act on that. I want to believe that. But a National Hereditary Cancer Day will bring the topic up to the media. That's very important for literacy, for general society and for medical society. Still a lot of healthcare professionals are not really aware regarding hereditary cancer. And this is like everybody of our colleagues should work. And in Tenturis, we are doing the clinical registry on European level. It's advancing fast.
That's the way to do it, no doubt about it. Okay, I think we are just about hitting our final time at 7 p.m.
I think that Anna has a question.
Okay, please do.
It was a very quick question to Tamara. Sorry, I wanted to know if that was a national project or an European project, but I understand from her last words that the consortium is an European one, right?
The financing consortium?
Yes.
No,
yes.
It's national.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Yeah.
But Hannah, we are talking about cancer. That's completely different from each disease, you know?
Yeah, anyways, it's a kind of cancer that is not really on the spot.
I know, but it's the same
We want
word.
to put it there.
Yeah.
Complex.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much for the invitation again.
So I'm supposed to do the closing.
Yes.
I think this was a very interesting webinar. I think we discussed very relevant issues on patient cooperation with clinical research, okay? And I think we all agree, and allow me to make a little bit of a summary here. We all agree that the patient should be part of the research team on what quality. That's to be discussed in a further webinar, okay? They should be involved in key reference groups that initiate discussions, that share knowledge, etc., 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 and also expertise on these areas. They should be involved also because we need the good, high-quality questions to do the studies that are relevant to patients and not relevant to the researchers, relevant to patients, in a perspective that then disseminating and implementing and disseminating all the data that we generate in so doing. So I think that we all agree that there's a lot of work to do. And certainly that work there's a lot of work already been done. And so I think that we exchange some good ideas for the future. I think we have a lot of work to do. I think we have a lot of, but I'm very glad, because if I'm going to do this webinar 5 years ago, it will be completely different. I think we are in a new era, and that people are looking at this in a different way. So once again, thank you so much to our speakers. First of all, it's a pleasure. Next time, maybe we should have in presence here in Lisbon, face to face. Thank you, Dr. Rosario, for your organization of this webinar. On behalf of the Isbe and myself, of course, thank you very much. I'd like also to thank the advocates of the European advocates for patients. And finally, last but not least, all of you guys that have been listening to us for about almost 2 hours. Thank you so much, and we promise you that we'll keep bringing you interesting stuff for you to look and to discuss at the end of the afternoons in the future. So thank you very much to everybody, and hope to see you again soon. And happy holidays, by the way. If you don't see us, happy holidays. Thank you very much.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
And we hope Portugal win.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
We are
The
always
game
winning.
starts in a minute. Okay, bye.
Bye bye.